What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first Group G World Cup preview here on Touchline Talk. Before I jump in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of these World Cup previews as we get closer and closer to the action in Qatar, as well as the rest of the content I put out every single week. You can also find my written work on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, as well as on Medium. Okay, Group G, like I said, leading it off with none other than Brazil. This is Brazil's 22nd World Cup appearance, also known as every World Cup on the men's side that has ever been played. Brazil has participated in all of them. Five-time winners: 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994, 2002. When you think of the history of the men's World Cup, when you think of soccer, Brazil is, if not the first country that comes to mind, very quickly a second or third. But when you think this sport, you think Brazil, and the World Cup history backs that up and is a big reason why Brazil is so closely associated with this sport, with all of the incredible players this country has turned out over the years. To make it to Men's World Cup number 22, Brazil topped CONMEBOL qualifying, 14 wins, 3 draws in their 17 games. If you remember, there was the situation with whether players had violated COVID protocol during the game with Argentina, so it got suspended and then canceled because it didn't matter because both teams had already qualified. So that is why Brazil only played 17 games rather than 18. Still had the most points in the South American qualifying region, so no issues in qualifying for Brazil. Your key players, names to know, so many to pick from on this loaded squad. The first one, though, I happened to be going in alphabetical order, but it worked out this way. It is Neymar. Neymar has to be part of this list, part of the conversation regarding this Brazil team. And I'm going to start with this because this is rather eye-opening, at least it was for me when I started looking at the numbers. There is a very real scenario in which Neymar leaves Qatar second in career appearances for the Brazilian men's national team and is the Brazilian men's national team's all-time leading scorer. He is 3 goals behind the legendary Pele right now. And yes, in terms of the caps, it depends on both how far they go and what role Dani Alves plays. If he plays any role at all, he's on the team. We'll see how that all plays out. But there's a very realistic scenario where you are talking about Neymar, who is still in his prime, has plenty of more good years left to go, already second in caps for this Brazilian men's national team and the men's national team's all-time leading goal scorer. That might not be something you think about when you think about Neymar's international career, but that is the point we are at. 10 previous World Cup appearances, 6 goals, 2 assists. He's been very good in this tournament. And the other part of his legacy when it comes to Brazil is, of course, the decisive penalty kick in that shootout to win gold at the 2016 Rio Olympics on home soil. So he has delivered a significant victory and a significant trophy, or, gold medal in this case, for Brazil on the international stage. What is missing is that really, really memorable World Cup, that World Cup triumph that Neymar has not had yet, but he has been good at previous World Cups. He has delivered a gold medal, and he puts up the numbers. They are there for anybody to see. He is easily, just inarguably one of the greatest players this country has ever produced, and that's really saying something. In terms of the other 2 players, next, I want to highlight Marquinhos. Nobody on this Brazil team played more minutes combined between the 2021 Copa America and World Cup qualifying than Marquinhos. He's not the flashiest name. He's not one of these incredibly gifted, technically, creative attackers that Brazil is so known for producing. He is a very solid center back who just does his job. But this is his 10th season with PSG. He has over 250 starts for that club. You don't get 250 starts for PSG without being really, really good. You don't become a staple for the Brazilian men's national team without being really, really good. And, center back has not always been the greatest position of strength for this Brazil team. Of course, they're, as I mentioned, known for those attacking players. Marquinhos has just been a steady presence, brings that experience, that leadership, and right, he plays a position that you don't normally sub out. So from a minute standpoint, from an important standpoint, which is what I'm trying to highlight in these names to know, is the players who are most important to these national teams. Marquinhos is right up there at the top of the list in terms of first names on the team sheets, guys you expect to be in those 11s when you're talking about Brazil at this point in time. Now, I am going to break this rule a little bit for my third player because it's Vinicius, and Vinicius has scored 1 goal for the Brazilian men's national team. However, the context here is important. Vinicius was a very exciting young talent and clearly part of Brazil's future 2 years ago. And then Vinicius had 27 goal involvements, 17 goals, 10 assists in La Liga. That was second behind teammate Karim Benzema. And, oh, by the way, also scored the game-winning goal in the Champions League final as Real Madrid won both La Liga and the Champions League. He had, breakout season is doing it a disservice. Everything came together in this, 9-month span for him where it's not even fair to talk about his brief history with Brazil and kind of how that factors into this tournament because he's in a completely different place. He is not one of these promising young players that's going to be a star one day. He is quite simply one of the best players in the world. And, of course, he's still incredibly young and he's got plenty of incredible years ahead of him. But when you talk about players who are most important to this Brazil team right now, he is up at the top of that list. He gives you that other option outside of Neymar that this team has lacked in the past. Of course, there have been big names, guys with incredible resumes, playing up top with Neymar. But it's always kind of felt like it's Neymar, and if you stop Neymar, then it might fall apart a little bit. Vinicius changes that equation. Because even if Neymar is good, Vinicius can be the best player on the field. And if you are trying to really take away Neymar, Vinicius has shown time and time again, if you leave him isolated one-on-one and give him a side of the field to work with, it is over. And so that is why I wanted to highlight him and sort of break my rule about not leaning too much on what people have done for their clubs and focus it on what they've done for the national team. Because Vinicius' role now, given what he did last season, what he means for Real Madrid now, as one of the best players in the world, and I believe Transfermarkt, if I remember correctly, has him as the third most valuable player in the world because of his age and his potential. He is now a vital part of Brazil today for the Qatar World Cup and, of course, for the next decade plus. So that is why I have no hesitation putting him here and sort of going against what I'm trying to do with this section, because what he did last season breaks the rules. It messes with the way I've been approaching this, because he went from being a name to know and, a potential breakout star to, oh, he has arrived and there just aren't many players in the world that offer what he does. And as I laid out, it's going to change the equation for this Brazil team in attack, because now you don't have one world-class, technical genius out there. You've got two of them, and they do things differently, and it's going to cause an entirely new headache for Brazil's opponents. In terms of breakout star, this category is always difficult for teams like Brazil, because Vinicius, for example, does not fall into the category of a breakout star anymore. He is just simply a star. And a lot of these guys have, been big names for 5 to 10 years at this point. There is one, though, who does generally fit this criteria, and that is Arsenal's Gabriel Martinelli. Gabriel Martinelli has 3 appearances for Brazil. All of them came off the bench. But he has been so good for Arsenal that he found a way to get himself on this team. And by good enough for Arsenal, I mean sensational. He is starting every single game, causing all kinds of chaos on that left wing for the team that is currently winning the Premier League as I record this. He was good last season, and you could really see that starting to click for him, and he's taken it to a whole nother level during this 2022-23 season. He's been sensational. He does all of the little stuff as well. He scores. He can hold the ball up. He can combine. He's a really good finisher. He's just terrific. And so he kind of went from, again, being one of the, certainly not the hype of a Vinicius. One of these guys who, it's a little bit of a project. Okay, he gets his big move to Arsenal. We'll see how this goes. Maybe he needs a loan move, something like that, to... You can't leave this guy, as good as these attacking players are, you can't leave him off this team with the form he's in and what he's doing at the highest level possible in the Premier League. It just all clicked for him. You even saw scenes in the All or Nothing documentary from Arsenal last season where members of the coaching staff were saying, oh, I absolutely love this guy. He's incredible, and he's just getting better and better and better. And oh, by the way, he's 21. So that is your breakout star, because he's kind of I would argue last season was really his breakout season because he did put up numbers. This is kind of his arrival into, he's not just a promising player, he is one of the best young talents in the world. And as a result, he basically said, look, you're not keeping me off this team. Or there are going to be some real questions as to why, because I'm just going to keep producing for the team currently winning the Premier League. So, breakout star, Gabriel Martinelli. Not sure what kind of role he's going to play for this team. Again, this is a loaded attack. He certainly was one of the last guys to get on this team. So that's the part where I'm a little hesitant. I'm not sure he's going to play a huge role at this tournament. But at the same time, I would have a hard time leaving him off the field, especially if you're struggling in attack with what he's doing and what he's proven he can provide. So we'll see what kind of role he plays, but that is your breakout star. Bottom line for this team. The reason for optimism, aside from the ridiculous amount of talent, is that I just find it hard to believe they're going to keep coming up short with how good they are. Think about this for a second. Since winning the World Cup in 2002, Brazil have had 3 quarterfinal exits, and 2014, where they got to the semifinals, lost 7-1 and finished in 4th place. So, yes, you got to the semifinals, but that Brazil game, or the Germany game, proved they were not particularly close to winning that tournament. That's what's happened in the last 4 World Cups. Quarterfinal exits and the 2014 semifinal debacle. Now, I have some theories as to, and I'll get into this as we get deeper into the World Cup, probably, and start actually talking about games. I have some theories as to why that might have been the case, and part of that is the reliance on Neymar that Vinicius changes, as I mentioned before. But also, at some point, you just have to think they find a way to be competitive in at least a semifinal. So outside of the obvious, well, they're really, really good, that's the other part of this for me, is they keep showing up with these loaded squads. You've got to think at some point it's going to work out for them. My question, my concern, the hole I would poke in this team, and it is stretching a little bit because there aren't very many, and you can talk about the outside backs. Yeah, the depth is not terrific. I have a bigger concern, though. And that concern is creativity in the midfield, if it comes to that. Again, you look at the attacking players on this roster. I mean, Martinelli would be a starter for almost any other team in the world. He might not see much of the field because of what else Brazil offers in attack. You've got, you just go down the list. Roberto Firmino is having a phenomenal season for Liverpool, has been a consistent member of this team, couldn't even make this squad. That's how deep they are. But then you look at this midfield, and your bigger names, the guys who have been playing important roles, It's holding midfielders and Lucas Paqueta. Now, yes, Paqueta is a good player. He offers some of that creativity going forward. He's not somebody that's blowing me away, though. When you're talking about, some of the, and I guess specifically England is probably a good example. Kevin De Bruyne for Belgium. Some of these other teams that are right there at the top and what they offer from that creativity standpoint. Because this midfield is there's some phenomenal players. It's Casemiro. It's Fabinho. These are guys playing at the highest level, playing in Champions League finals. I'm higher on Fred than most people. He does some really good things sometimes for Manchester United. Sometimes it doesn't go so well. It's kind of a 50-50 proposition with him. But those are your big midfielders. It's all of these guys who don't offer much going forward. They're not creative players. It's not what they do. They're destroyers. They're tempo setters. So the other player in this equation is Bruno Guimaraes. I would 100% be playing Guimaraes over Paqueta, and I'm just not convinced that's going to happen because Paqueta was the guy during qualifying. And yes, Guimaraes has not been this household name that he now is throughout, the past 4 years. It's been a pretty quick rise for him, and now he's starring for a Newcastle team that's climbing up the Premier League and knocking on the door of the Champions League. But if Guimaraes isn't going to get on the field very much, that's asking, A, lot of Paqueta to be that creative guy. And B, also just this midfield is not designed to do that. So I see a world, and again, this is poking a hole for the sake of poking a hole, where if you get whatever kind of attacking group is thrown out there isolated against some of these better, more organized teams, I do see that as a problem. You don't have some of those dynamic players filling in at the edge of the box, joining the attack. And Fred does do this sometimes, in fairness to him, although I don't think he's going to see much of the field either. But that extra guy to unlock a defense, you're asking the wingers to do that. You're asking Neymar to do that, not these midfielders with the exception of Guimaraes, depending on the role he plays. So that would be my concern, is if this becomes a problem, do they have a way to solve it? I don't think it's going to be a problem because they're so good out wide, whatever kind of combination of players ends up out there. But the weakness in this team for me is I don't think they're going to rely on the one creative midfielder I really believe in. The bottom line, though, is this. Anything less than winning this tournament is a disappointment. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed to. It doesn't mean they're going to. They are certainly among the favorites. There's a real argument they are the favorite. There's just so much talent, and it's been so long. It's the general expectation for Brazil. It's not like it's exclusive to this group of players in this squad. The expectation is to show up at World Cups and to win them. Anything less than that is ultimately a disappointment, and that's no different during this World Cup in Qatar. That is all for Brazil. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.